Hi friends, I have a new true crime video for you today, and we're going to be discussing a case that happened back in March of 2019 when a young woman, after a night out of celebrating with her friends, was abducted by a man she believed was her Uber driver and was ultimately murdered. I figured that this case would be an interesting one to bring up on my channel now because the trial for this began on July 20th of 2021, so only a few weeks ago. And the sentencing for the man who was responsible for this murder happened on July 27th of 2021. So as of today, as I'm filming this, it is August 1st. So the sentencing happened 5 days ago. And when I heard about this case, I knew that it was definitely one that I wanted to speak about on my channel. What happened to Samantha was incredibly horrible, and she had entered a vehicle thinking that it was her Uber driver. And I'm sure that a lot of us have also done the same. Like for me, I've had a few instances over the years where I just wasn't paying attention and I would get into a car thinking it was my Uber or my Grab. Grab is like the Asia's Uber here. So yeah, I would get into a car thinking that was my driver and it would turn out to not be my driver. Luckily though, when I did do that, the driver would just be like, yeah, you're in the wrong car. Luckily, I've never had anything weird or horrible happen to me in that sense, but unfortunately, Samantha was not as lucky. So I definitely think that this case is a really good reminder for all of us to just be more vigilant when we're out and about and to just pay attention to what we're doing when we get into strangers' cars, because you never know what type of person you're going to be encountering and what could happen to you. There is a lot to get through, and I also need to do my makeup while telling you guys all this because I actually need to run out to do grocery shopping before the curfew hits. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently based in Bangkok and we're in our 4th lockdown and there is a curfew. So it's Sunday, I need to do grocery shopping, but I also wanted to film this, so I figured I would just do it at the same time. Anyways, let's just jump into it. So the young woman that we're going to be discussing today is Samantha Josephson, and in March of 2019, she was a 21-year-old political science student who was graduating from USC with a full scholarship to go to Drexel Law School. And it's incredibly unfortunate that tragedy struck Samantha when it did, because on the night that she was murdered, she was actually out with her friends in downtown Columbia celebrating her law school admission. And Samantha's boyfriend Greg testified that he wasn't there with her that night, but she was out with her friends at a bar in an area called 5 Points in downtown Columbia. While on the phone with Samantha that evening, Greg had told her that she should go out and celebrate with her friends and that she'd worked so hard for this and she deserved to celebrate. So Samantha decided to go out. And around 2 a.m. on March 29th of 2019, Samantha was wrapping up her night and was getting ready to go home. She had called an Uber and was waiting on the side of the road for an Uber to arrive. And according to surveillance footage, at around 2:09 a.m. on March 29th, a black Chevrolet driven by a man named Nathaniel Rowland circled the block and then pulled up right next to Samantha. Samantha, seeing that this car had pulled up to her, obviously thought that this was her driver and entered the vehicle. And honestly, this kind of thing happens more often than we think. No one ever thinks that this kind of thing will happen to them, right? So often we do let down our guard. And it's just really unfortunate that when this did happen to Samantha, it happened to her with a man that was just really sick in the head. So anyways, Samantha enters the car, and as she does, she also turns on her tracking and shares this with her boyfriend and her roommate so that they could see that she got home safely. And I think this is very smart. Samantha's boyfriend Greg and her roommate both confirmed that they were tracking Samantha on her route home via her cell phone and through this app called Find My Friends. And they had said that they watched in real time as the vehicle that Samantha was in started to head in the complete opposite direction of her home. So when Greg noticed this, he immediately tried to call and to text Samantha, but unfortunately the text never went through. There was no read receipt and her call went straight to voicemail. And then soon after that, her location stopped being shared with Greg, and he said that he found this really surprising because this has never happened to them in their relationship before. And now Greg, assuming that Samantha had just maybe forgotten her phone in the Uber, decides to call Samantha's roommate to say, hey, like, did Samantha make it home? I can't reach her. but they also said no, they haven't been able to reach her either, and they haven't seen her at the house yet. And he eventually just fell asleep at 5 a.m. and at that time he still hadn't heard back from her. I'm not sure why he decided to just go to bed. If it were me and it was my partner, I would not be able to sleep. Like, I'd be panicking. But I don't know, maybe he just assumed that she would just make her way home, or there was nothing to worry about. So the next day, Samantha still wasn't home, and this is when the panic starts to settle into Samantha's roommates and her boyfriend. And Samantha's roommate then decides to go onto Samantha's computer and to access her emails to see if they could find any clue as to what had happened to Samantha. And when Samantha's roommate checked Samantha's email, she was horrified to find that there was an email there saying that Samantha's Uber ride was canceled. So now they're asking themselves, okay, if her ride was canceled, then whose car was she in? So now everybody's worried. Everybody's panicking. Samantha hasn't come home, and she didn't even get into the car that she was supposed to get into, and they don't know where she is. They haven't heard from her. They decide to call the police. However, not so long after, Samantha's body was discovered. Samantha was found dead by a group of hunters in a remote area approximately 65 miles away from the area that she was in when she was out with her friends. So when the hunters came across Samantha's body, they said that they found loads of scratches, stab marks, and other wounds on her body. And from their investigation, authorities had come to the conclusion that when Samantha had entered Nathaniel's vehicle, he immediately activated the child locks in the car, thereby trapping Samantha inside the car. Because when a child lock is activated, it means that you can't open the car door from the inside, and that can only be opened from the outside. And once Nathaniel had Samantha trapped in his car and they were a little bit away from the area that he had just picked her up from, Nathaniel proceeded to stab Samantha a total of 120 times. And during this attack, Samantha did try to shield herself, and she ended up getting stabbed in her hands and also in her head. Nathaniel had stabbed Samantha so hard in the head that the knife went through her skull and into her brain. She was really savagely murdered. Like, to stab someone 120 times, like, what is your problem, dude? Like, why are you stabbing somebody 120 times? She was fatally stabbed in multiple areas of her body and profusely bled out. And according to a pathologist who did the autopsy on her body, she probably died within 10 to 20 minutes. So after brutally stabbing and murdering Samantha, Nathaniel then takes her body over to a town called New Zion and leaves her body in a field just to be discovered by the turkey hunters that I mentioned earlier in the video. And they discovered her body about 14 hours after her kidnapping. So now that there was an investigation going on for Samantha's murder, police were obviously looking into surveillance footage, and they were trying to, figure out who had committed this horrible crime. And they, on March 30th, spotted Nathaniel driving around Five Points area, so the area that Samantha was kidnapped from, in the same exact car that he had kidnapped Samantha in. So the police, seeing that Nathaniel's car was the exact same one that matched the description of the car that Samantha had entered, they decided to try to pull Nathaniel over. And Nathaniel, seeing what's happening, decides to stop and then tries to run away from the police on foot. However, he was caught by the police and he was brought in for questioning. And when police officials searched Nathaniel's car, they found a bunch of incriminating evidence. They found cleaning supplies, and on top of that, they found Samantha's blood in his car. Samantha's blood could be found in the passenger seat as well as in the trunk. And on top of that, the child locks were still activated, which led the police officials to believe that that was how Nathaniel had trapped Samantha in the car. Prosecutors during the trial also claimed that they had footage of Nathaniel trying to use Samantha's debit card, as well as trying to sell her cell phone. Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend also testified that after Samantha's disappearance, Nathaniel did show up at her house, and when he got there, she saw that there was blood in the car and that he was trying to get rid of the blood and, trying to clean the blood with liquid bleach. And then he was also trying to clean a hunting knife that was covered in blood. Suspicious. Investigators did search the trash behind Nathaniel's girlfriend's house, and they did find cleaning supplies and a knife that had Samantha's blood on them. Samantha's blood was also found on a sock and a bandana that belonged to Nathaniel. I mean, it is certainly not looking good for Nathaniel. Nathaniel, despite all of the evidence brought against him, claimed that he was innocent. And Nathaniel's defense attorney, Alicia Good, stated that since none of Nathaniel's DNA was found on Samantha's body or under her fingernails, then there's no possible way that he could have done it. She also stated that investigators did photograph Nathaniel within 24 hours after his arrest, and that his skin showed no marks, no scratches, or nothing that would have been consistent with Samantha fighting back. However, a forensic scientist and DNA analyst did testify during the week of the trial that while his DNA was not found under Samantha's fingernails, her DNA was certainly found under his. So on July 20th of 2021, so just a few weeks ago, Nathaniel's trial began. The trial took only 7 days and took only over an hour for the jury to convene and then come to the conclusion that Nathaniel was indeed guilty. Nathaniel was also allegedly responsible for kidnapping another woman in Colombia and then trying to sell her items as well. Telling you this fella's up to no good. The alleged victim was carjacked by 2 men at a traffic light in October of 2018. They then allegedly physically assaulted her, kidnapped her, forced her to drive to a ATM where they withdrew money, and then forced her to take them to her home where they would then steal her things like her PlayStation 4 and other valuables, and then they would try to sell it. All of this happened in Richland County, and after the alleged abduction, the Richland County officers did testify saying that Nathaniel was found trying to sell the items that were stolen from this woman at a pawn shop, and he was caught and charged with obtaining goods under a false premise. During this trial, the prosecutors did call upon 31 witnesses to testify. This included the turkey hunter who had found her body, Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, and multiple state law enforcement division experts and investigators. Nathaniel's defense attorney, however, didn't call in any witnesses, and Nathaniel also didn't testify. On July 27th of 2021, after only an hour of the jury convening, Nathaniel was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Samantha Josephson. And prior to the sentencing, the presiding judge allowed Nathaniel to speak. And when he did speak, Nathaniel stated the following: "Your Honor, I know I'm innocent, but I guess what I know and what I think really doesn't matter." So obviously there is no remorse from this man. He still tries to maintain his innocence, which pisses the judge off. The judge actually responds in part saying that there are thousands of roads that lead back to Nathaniel's guilt, and that he praises all the law enforcement officials who collected this avalanche of evidence against Nathaniel. He also added that this was by far the most gruesome case he's ever had to preside over during his decades of service on this bench. And the judge then proceeded to sentence Nathaniel to life in prison. I personally, after watching Nathaniel's sentencing video, really like this judge. If you listen to his words and just his response, I think he was really well spoken and really classy about the way he handled the case and how he handled Nathaniel's just bullshit. I'm just gonna say it like that, yeah. And if you guys have the time, I did link the sentencing video in my description. And yeah, if you have the time, I recommend watching it. I mean, I thought it was a really good sentencing, so if you guys are interested in watching that, it's linked below. I'm just so annoyed though by the fact that despite all the evidence, after everything, Nathaniel still has the audacity to try to maintain his innocence. You stabbed a woman 120 times, an innocent woman who he didn't even know. It was just such a meaningless crime. He honestly probably did this just to try to rob her, but obviously it went just beyond that. What Nathaniel did was beyond words, and he lacks remorse for what he did. He even made it a point to tell the judge that he had wished the state had spent more time trying to find the person who was actually responsible for the crime, instead of just being satisfied with pinning it on him, which is just so delusional. At this point, like, what are you doing? You've already already been caught. There's so much evidence against you. There's video footage of you kidnapping this poor woman and then trying to use her debit card, trying to sell her phone. Like, what are you doing? Just give it up. But again, the sentencing video from this judge was really good, and his response to Nathaniel's lack of remorse for the crime that he committed is incredibly savage and satisfying. So that does bring us to the end of this case. By the time you guys see this video, it won't be that long of a video at all, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys here and say that it took me so long to film this. I started filming at like 2 p.m. and now it's almost 5, so it took me 3 hours just to be able to try to film this, just because doing makeup and talking about crime is not as easy as you'd think. I want to wrap up this video by just reminding you guys to please stay safe out there and to stay vigilant. Always be aware of your surroundings. You really never know what type of person you'll encounter, and I feel like it's very easy to just assume that nothing bad's ever going to happen to you, and hopefully that, you know, that is the case, but you really don't know. Like, sometimes things happen, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or just somebody has bad intentions. So just stay vigilant and check that you have the correct driver before getting into some stranger's car, because you never know. So yeah guys, that is the end of the case, and thank you so much. I finally finished my makeup. I am really behind on time, so I need to get up and go ASAP. As always, thank you so much for watching my videos, and if you like this content, please click like and subscribe, and I look forward to our next video. Bye guys!